Well, good evening, everybody. Appreciate you joining us tonight. This is our third episode in season one of More Wild Talk. And we're getting better every week, I think, because this week we actually have a logo, which you just saw jump up there. And so we're still working on it. We're having a good time putting it together. And we hope we can keep you entertained tonight with some good information as we go along. And as we're kind of getting started here and waiting for people to join us from all over the country, Tracy.
All over the country.
All over the country. I think you can see we both have our baseball hats on because we're missing some baseball.
Yes.
So tell me how you're getting along with no baseball.
Well, I've got a little bit of hope right now with the possibility of coming at the end of June or July. Although today they canceled, I don't know if you saw this, they canceled the Little League World Series for this year. So that was a bummer. I like watching the World Series. But yeah, I'm just watching a lot of old clips and old games and things like that.
Yeah, I think
a lot of Netflix.
This week is 1995 World Series Braves. Of course, that might be just the Atlanta station that's carrying all those games, and we're remembering our only World Series championship in Atlanta this week. But it's kind of tough to get through the summer if we're not going to have baseball.
Yeah, it is.
And particularly now that the Cubs are halfway decent.
I know it took us this long.
Yeah,
we had a chance.
But anyway, I think we've got some good things to talk about. We're going to give away a T-shirt tonight. We have a kind of interesting little quiz for y'all to jump in on. And, well, let's show the shirt first, Tracy.
Yeah, hold it up.
Yeah, hold that thing up. So we got the Church Left the Building T-shirt, another one of those to give away. And there's going to be a poll question come up, and it's going to ask about some things that I may or may not have done. And if you can pick the one that's false, then you might win the T-shirt, or at least you'll be in the drawing to win the T-shirt. So just pay attention to that poll. We'll announce the winner a little bit later on. First of all, we want to thank Bob and Sandy Brackett for sponsoring tonight's episode. These microphones are not cheap, Bob and Sandy, and so we appreciate your sponsorship and supporting this program. And Tracy has this pink book out here for some reason. I'm not sure what it is.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because last week I got a text with our show, and it's this girl named Kirsten. Used to be Wild. I think she may be kin to you in some way. But she texted, she said, "Will you straighten that pink book that's on the shelf behind your side by next week?" So this book was up here, so we completely removed the book so there would be no distractions this
And
week.
we got it straight.
And it's semi-straight. Let's see, that's better. That's better. There we go. So yes, that's the reason for the pink book. Good book. It's the Revelation. Very good.
Well, we got last night the governor announced a little, letting us off a little bit of our restrictions. So that was maybe good news, maybe not. And there's a poll for you to answer that question for us too. So go ahead and jump in on that. We'd like to see what you have to say about that. But apparently we can start doing some things we haven't been able to do for the last several weeks. And I think all of us are getting a little tired of the lockdown and kind of ready to get past that. I don't know about you, Tracy, but I mean, truthfully, I haven't changed too much of my routine on this lockdown. I mean, I still get up in the morning, I'm sitting on the front porch reading the paper, drinking coffee, do a little yard work, get the mail out of the mailbox. Now, as soon as it hits lunch, then things change because I normally have my normal lunch group I go to lunch with. I can't do that anymore. The restaurants are closed. Can't run by the bank and go in and say hi to the tellers. Can't just run into any old store to pick up something. You're going to have to be, you want to have maybe a mask on. You don't want to talk to anybody. You want to kind of avoid them. I don't know about you. I mean, what kind of changes have you had in your routine? Are you just coming to the church building and working on your sermon and kind of doing the same old thing?
Well, I'm still coming to the church building and working on sermons. The thing that's changed is I used to take Fridays off, and now I take Saturday and Sundays off because we do all our recording on Thursday night. In fact, we just finished recording a while ago for our online worship experience on Sunday. And so, but I'm having to learn a lot of new things, especially by way of technology and getting in front of the camera, and I'm doing some things on my own Facebook page in the morning just to give some time for prayer and reflection and talking about things. But some parts of it I really like. Some parts of it is very isolated. We're ready to get back and see all our people again. We really, really miss that aspect of what we do.
And just to kind of make sure on that poll, you actually answer the poll, not just put it in the comments, so we can get a good percentage on that. That would help us out, kind of see where everyone's at on that. So we kind of, I think probably we can all say it hadn't been too much of a change, but it's just enough change where you say, I want to get back to normal. I'm tired of this virus. I might be living a dull life, but at least it's my dull life. And I like to get back to the dull stuff as far as that's concerned. So had a question last week that we didn't get to about rights and how can the government tell us what to do as far as locking us down in a house and telling us we can't do this or that. So let's talk about that a little bit. Tracy, what have you've probably seen, like I have seen, some people complaining about people restricting my rights and this and that. So what's going on? Well, I'm going to take a few minutes, kind of just give us a little civics lesson. I think is important because we forget about this and we don't pay attention to how our government's actually set up. And then when we get in a situation like this, we're kind of blaming the wrong people, maybe, if you're blaming anybody. But we need to remember we're in a federal system with states that are under that system, so to speak. There's a U.S. Constitution. Each state has their own constitution. And then there's federal statutes and state statutes, and how do they work? How do they work together? Well, the bottom line is, in a situation like this, it's really the states who have the power to do something. The police power is reserved for the states to exercise. The U.S. Constitution tells the federal government what they can do, and then the 10th Amendment says all those other things that we didn't tell the federal government that they could do, that's reserved for the states to do. And what it's popularly known as is the police power. And so the states have the police power, and what that means is they're allowed to do things to preserve the health, safety, and welfare of their citizens. So a lot of the if you're sitting around trying to blame the federal government or President Trump for certain things, you're probably talking about the wrong entity, because each state, their governor and locals can make their decisions. We see that happening here. Our local county commission and city council are deciding whether the beaches are open or not. Our governor is the one who's making the rules on whether we can go here or there. And they have a whole lot of power to do that. And their only restriction is really going to be if there is some right that they're specifically violating. That, let me back up. There's no unrestricted rights. Every right can be restricted in certain ways. And one of the ways they can be restricted is just this way. There's a health panic or pandemic. There's this kind of thing going on, and they can make all kinds of restrictions as long as it's related to that particular situation. So they're perfectly within their powers to tell us to stay in our house. They're perfectly within our powers to say we can't go to a restaurant. There's obviously no right to go to a restaurant. And, those kind of things. What we need to be talking about, though, is, how reasonable are those in relation to what's going on? Well, if you go back 30 days, I don't think there's anybody that really could say, I definitively know what's going to happen. And so, Tracy, we should give our elected officials the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the best they can, as opposed to assuming there's some evil intent or malicious intent in doing it. Now, can governments use something like this to try to expand their powers? I would think so. I would think so. But, we have some interesting, as Christians, we have some interesting things told us in Romans.
Yes.
And talk about that government. They are where we're told, where they were told back then, hey, honor that government, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we can sometimes feel our government isn't fair, and there are things that I think every culture can look at and say this was a bad decision, or I don't like their policies and things like that. But when you really compare to what the scriptures tell us about, submitting to the government and to pray for those who are in authority and things of those sort, I mean, they're praying for some pretty bad folks. I mean, people that were persecuting Christians at that particular time, which I think is also interesting as well, because I think some people see this as, that this is like a government overreach in trying to take control of Christians. Do you see this as like this is a type of persecution for a government to say you can't meet with more than 10 people?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because we do have a constitutional right, freedom of religion, and therefore that is one of those rights that you can look at and say, okay, this regulation you're putting on me, is that really necessary to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish? In other words, you're restricting my right to get together and worship. Is that really necessary? Well, I think, it's kind of, there's some obvious examples here, I think. You see the example of the drive-in church where everyone's in their own car going to a service and listening to it on their car radio. Well, that's obviously a pretty safe way to do it. And there's really no reason that the government ought to be restricting that kind of situation. On the other hand, if we're packing 200 people in a small auditorium to have a service, that definitely probably could be restricted. Once again, there's no unrestricted rights. We have freedom of religion, but that doesn't mean you can do child sacrifice as part of your religious practices. In other words, there's reasonable restrictions that can be placed, and in this situation, a reasonable restriction would be we can't have the spread of the virus happening by having these people gather. Now, if you can gather in fact, the court case just came out where the federal judge said, look, they can have drive-in church. There's not a problem there.
Right. Yeah, and I think it goes along as far as who we are as Christians is loving your neighbor. Mm-hmm. In this situation, this is not a fact saying you can't assemble mm-hmm. because of we think your religion cannot be done in our country. This is a matter of people were dying, people still are dying. But I think it's a matter of loving your neighbor. Right. More than it is about my rights and what's happening, because we're going to be able to go back. I mean, we already are planning, to be able to finally come back and to be here in this building with our own phases as well. So it's not a matter of they're trying to stop us.
Right, and that's exactly right, and that's why we need to give the benefit of the doubt to, let's say, the governor or our mayor and city council or the county commission, because they're most likely motivated by the fact that they don't want people getting sick and dying. Right. That's why they're doing what they're doing. Right. And now, we may disagree with it. We may have a better idea how to do it. Right. It may have been, when you look at it in hindsight and they get all the data in, that all we need to do is everybody wear a mask.
Yeah.
But that's just, that's the old hindsight, 2020 is always, hindsight's always 2020. You can look back
Yeah.
and say that.
And well, really a good question would be, would you want to be in that position?
Right.
And if you were in that position,
Mhm.
do you think at this point, looking back 30 days, you would have made all wise decisions?
Right.
But let me ask you this: why not? Why does the governor get on and it's like he's making these decisions? Why not have the Florida Supreme Court make these decisions, or the courts, or House of Representatives, or whatever? Why do you think it's good for one person to be able to get up like Governor DeSantis did yesterday and tell us what our next phase is going to be?
Well, I think in a situation like this, you really need that one person that's gonna make a decision. Someone has to be in charge, and, the legislature has part of that, because the legislature has already passed laws that authorize the governor to do certain things and not do certain things. But, yeah, he's gotta be able to make that decision, and that's who and frankly, we ought to be thankful for the system we have, where the federal government is out there, but they're leaving it up to the states to make their own decisions. Because, New York is different than Florida, and Montana is different than Florida, and there's different places, and they need to make the local decision that's best for them. And then if we don't like the decision, we can vote the mayor out next time and say, we don't like the way you made your decisions and all that. But let's don't assume that they're doing it for some bad reason. They're trying their best, and they're doing it on, with the information they have, trying to do their best. Well, what's interesting, Tracy, is the poll that we have out there about whether you're going to go out. We have a poll where we're asking, in Florida, we can go out Monday and go to the restaurant, and how many people are going to head out to the restaurant on Monday. Well, so far our poll is no 44%, yes 20%, and 36% not sure about it. But what that kind of points out is I think it bears out when you look at some of the statistics, is people stopped doing things before the government told us to stop doing things.
Right.
People stopped flying. Some people stopped going to restaurants.
Yeah.
And we're looking here, okay, we're going to be allowed to go, and we've got only 20% of the people saying, yeah, I'm ready to go back to a restaurant, even though I'm allowed to.
Right.
And even more interesting, I think, and I shared this with you earlier, you were surprised about it too, the most recent poll shows about 2/3 up to 75% of Americans are just fine with the restrictions and think they ought to continue for another couple of weeks.
Right.
And that's a nationwide look, so that takes into account some of the states that have a little bit worse illness than we do.
See that surprises me. When you told me that earlier, I was just shocked. And I think the reason is because I see people's responses on social media. So what does it say about what this poll is telling us? And do you know what who did the poll? Do you know who it was?
Oh, the poll was conducted by the Washington Post.
By the Washington Post. So is there a discrepancy maybe in what we see on social media, or is there something here that maybe we just don't know about but if these polls are telling us 75%, and yet you get online and you see, it seems like that. Maybe it just seems like people are really angry, and we know there's people right here in Florida and other places around the country that have been laid off. The unemployment rate is shot up. In Florida, people have had a lot of problems getting their unemployment, and there's a real sense of frustration. In fact, I don't know if you saw this or not, but this afternoon I read a report, a lady, I forget what state it was, Indianapolis, actually that's where it was, is in Indianapolis. A postal worker was shot in the chest by a man that was aggravated because he had not received his stimulus check, and just shoots this lady. So maybe it's just there's so much of this other kind of stuff that's out there that we're really not hearing the 75% as much, or it feels that way.
Well, if we were in an earlier age, you wouldn't even know anything about what happened up north for another month or so before the news got down here. But yeah, so we all know the social media is kind of is the kind of people that are out there on both extremes, trying to stir up stuff, and that.
And
you have to
remember,
be firm about
we
it.
are on social media.
Well, you
now,
have
so.
you have to be careful about that. You have to be careful what we're saying here tonight.
Yeah.
Well, the other poll from Colorado that I did tell you about that just came out, 64% of those who have lost a job or have hours cut in the pandemic, and this is in California, are in favor of keeping the state's businesses closed, even the ones that are losing job because they're afraid to go out and with the illness. Of course, Colorado does have legal marijuana. That may have something to do.
That may have
something
something
to do with that. But no. But the other thing, we talked about how the government, given a government official, giving him the benefit or her the benefit of the doubt on what they're doing, and recognize they're going to make mistakes based on insufficient information. They just got to go with what they know, and as far as that goes.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it okay to disagree with a decision that's made? And if it is okay to do that, then at what point do we cross a line, at least in our Christian faith, do we cross a line that, we're really not acting like Christians anymore?
Well, once again, you have the right to protest, and protesting, once again, I think California tried to pass a law saying you cannot protest. That's going to be unconstitutional. I mean, in other words, as long as you're observing the social distancing and you're doing those kind of things that are important to do to not transmit the disease, there's no reason why you can't protest. We are so fortunate to live in a country where we can give our input in that kind of way and speak out and not have to worry about being persecuted for speaking out against the government. We're lucky that we live in a country with a capitalist system, with a market-based system like this, because right now we have so many corporations and people who are working hard to find vaccines and medicines that will attack this, that are putting redoing the assembly line so they can get out more equipment to our nurses and doctors. We are able to do that because we live in that kind of country where people jump in to do that. We don't have to rely on the government to do it. We complain about the government's not ready, so you shouldn't be wanting more of that. You should be wanting less government and more of that. And of course, we always need to point out, really don't blame the government for not being prepared if you're the one running out getting toilet paper because you weren't prepared.
Well, I can tell you,
it's hard to know what's coming.
I was not prepared. I was definitely not
because
prepared.
it's hard to know what's coming, whether you're the government or whether it's just your own household.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of tough. That's kind of tough. Well, Tracy, we got, as you said, you mentioned earlier that you taped your Sunday event a little bit earlier, and as you said, we do that every Thursday.
Right.
Thursday afternoon, you get that done. So give us a little preview, just a little short preview of what we can look forward to on Sunday.
Sure. Well, we're going to start a three-part series, I think, because this is the first one, and I'm planning on 3. It's called Belong, and it's just that sense of community. I can tell people are on here, asking what they're looking forward to the most and being back in our church community again. We're all missing it. But it's really, this week is just dealing with the importance of our community. I've got some very special guests, very special guests this week sitting around the table with me. But I think it's something that really hits to us right now and where we are.
Yeah, once again, we kind of always want to remind ourselves that from our Christian faith and our Christian worldview that we're all about what's best for our neighbor, what's best for our older population, what's best for those folks as far as, and not what our right is.
Right.
Sure, we've got rights and we can claim our rights, but a lot of times we should not be claiming our rights. We should just be doing the thing that is best for the other person, and just kind of bearing the burden it might have on us. And as I said, I don't know. I think I'm probably more like a lot of people that I'm not sure it's too much of a change that's going on. Really, I've been that restricted that much, other than saving lunch money.
Yeah, and a scripture that comes to my mind during this time, I believe it's 1 Timothy 2, where it says that we're to live at peace with all people, as much as it depends on us. And I think we can. I think we got to find that fine line of where we can say how we feel. You're right. We live in a country where we can do that. And we have a right. We have a vote that we're able to cast and things of that sort. But there's also the aspect of we need to be people of peace, and I think that's more important in the kingdom of God than just some of the things that we feel like we have to have ourselves.
And yes, so the bottom line is we can comply with what we're told to do. We can we can protest that by the right way by saying, hey, I have a better idea, or this or that. But we're going to respect the fact that that was the decision that was made. And then, and learn from that and go on from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I think, I don't know, let's check with Peyton to see if we have a winner in which one is false about me.
Oh, and what?
Say them out loud and tell them to put it in the comments.
Put it in the comments? Okay. You said you had a poll up, or what?
It's up, but they can't fully read the answers.
Oh, I guess they're having,
You see it.
Peyton's saying you're having trouble reading the answers, so got to pick which one is false about me. And there's 4 things. Attended a professional baseball game with President Bush. Climbed to the top of Mount Fuji in Japan. Have an ancestor who was a pope. And had lunch with the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court. One of those is false. Family members not allowed to enter.
Yes, you cannot win a T-shirt if you're a family member. And while people are voting, I don't think we mentioned last week who won the poll.
Yeah, we had a book given.
Yeah, I gave a book. It was Mary Gherkin. I know Mary knows this because it was delivered to her house.
Yeah.
So yes, so that's the poll. Put in your answers, and hopefully we'll be able to get nobody so far. Oh, we have somebody.
Okay, nobody got
80
it correct. The
zero correct
poll
so
is
far.
closed, and nobody got it correct.
Is the polls closed?
Well, I don't know. We'll leave the polls open, but we're signing off. Hope you all have a good night. We've enjoyed being with you. We'll see you next Thursday night. We would love to hear any comment or any topics you would like us to cover. We'd be glad. We can talk about it. Tracy and I can talk about anything.
We can. Even pink books.
And
we can talk
we're
about
experts on about everything.
We definitely think we are.
Yes.
We're as good as anybody else on social media,
Exactly.
I feel like.
Exactly. So tune in next week. We'll see you then.